Shalom Aleichem, and welcome to this new program. I'm sorry that nobody's going to be in person this time because I need to, I can't say unfortunately, fortunately fly to my grandson's bris. It's a show tomorrow morning, so I wanted to pre-record this so everybody will have it at the end of this limit for this week. And as we discussed and we sent in the email that we're going to be learning the halachos of Kiddush and Havdalah and hopefully halachos Neros. If we have enough time at the end, we'll also learn a little bit of the halachos of Seder through this parak. But the parak that we're going to be learning is parak Arbi Psachim, which is a beautiful, beautiful parak. Anybody who's not learned it yet, who has, I'm sure you know, what a beautiful parak it is. But we're going to go through it in hopefully a new level of depth and to see the lamdas, which takes us to the halacha l'maisa, which we'll finish off by seeing the full siman and Shulchan Aruch as we always have in the past. And now we're going to learn it as a parak and just seeing the Shulchan Aruch as we go along at the end of each sugya. So with that, we'll begin with some ha'aras on the daf here, starting the first sugya, which is going to take us first a little bit into the halachos of the Seder and halachos Pesach as well. Initially, this first Mishnah until we get further along into the deeper halachos of Kiddush and Havdalah. So now, the Mishnah says, "I'm Sadi Tesam Abezim Psachim, Erev Psachim." Our girsa of the Mishnah is Erev Psachim, as opposed to Arbi Psachim. At the top, it's called Arbi Psachim, but the Mishnah our girsa says Erev Psachim. Tosfos will discuss this. That we have different halachos over here that it says we'll come back to the lashon whether it's Erev or Arbi. So Erev Psachim is Savach LeMincha Lo Yochal Adam Achetechshach. So Savach LeMincha, which the Rashbam says, by the way, just to keep in mind that the main limud in Arbi Psachim is the Rashbam, not Rashi. Rashi on top is not so miyuchas when it comes to Arbi Psachim. We're not sure which Rashi had different stages that he wrote it, so we don't really have it doesn't have the same validity as the usual Rashi. So we learn the main limud is the Rashbam, the grandson of Rashi, which is on the bottom side. So the Rashbam says that Arbi Psachim Mincha is Mincha Tana Kodem Mincha Mat Chatzi Shah B'Tchila Shah Asiri. So it's going to be the beginning of the 10th hour of the day, the midday being 6th hour, counting out 3 more hours. The beginning of the 10th hour, from that point on, that's when it's telling us that a person can't eat. Tan Tamid Vishchab Shom Mechza makes a calculation through Korban Tamid. And the reason why Lo Yochal Adam, the Mishnah says a person shouldn't eat a meal at that point. The Rashbam says, Kadesh Yochal Matzah Shel Mitzvah L'Te'avon Shuvhider Mitzvah. You should eat it with heaven, you should eat it with gusto, with hunger, which is a hider mitzvah. And the Rashbam is saying a chiddush over here that the concept of hider mitzvah, which we have throughout Shas, which is the learned from Zeh Kelev Van Vehu, that a person he's snarl the fun of a mitzvah, so learn from the pasuk of Kriyas Yamsuf. The Klal Yisrael had the beauty of the Kriyas Yamsuf, that they crystallized that into doing the mitzvahs, performing them with beauty from that point on. We have a mitzvah to be mahader, a mitzvah to do a mitzvah in a beautiful way, not just to do the mere minimum. So the Rashbam is telling us over here a chiddush that generally speaking, the Gemara says it's not all the fun of a mitzvah means to beautify the mitzvahs means to have a sefer Torah, beautiful sefer Torah, beautiful tefillin, beautiful tzitzis, beautiful different the objects of the mitzvahs. The chefzer shel mitzvah should be a beautiful chefzer shel mitzvah. Sefer Torah, beautiful sefer Torah. Here the Rashbam is telling us a chiddush that the hitter is not in the chefzer shel mitzvah, in the chayfetz that you're using, but rather in the Maisa mitzvah. This is the first time we see the concept of hitter mitzvahs in the Maisa mitzvah. You could always say that you should read the Torah beautifully, and they call that hitter mitzvah. The Balkori should read it beautifully, or you should shake the lulav in a beautiful way, or put your tefillin on in a lot of kavanah in a beautiful way. We don't call that hitter mitzvah. The hitter mitzvah is always a mitzvah in the way you have the tefillin written and put together, and the way the Sefer Torah looks. It's always in the chayfetz shel mitzvah. Here the Rashbam is machadish, something which is it's questionable where he gets this from. To put this into the category of hitter mitzvah as far as the Maisa mitzvah is concerned. And the question is, can we learn from here this Rashbam to tell us that every mitzvah is also, of course, we're supposed to do it in a beautiful way, but is that included in the category of hitter mitzvah? It's a big chiddush with the Rashbam is saying. one of the Bnei Kol many years ago when we learned this wanted to say that perhaps since matzah is supposed to be lechem oni, which is a type of like a nius, so maybe that's a special case. It's an exception to the rule, because over here, in order to eat it like an ani, one needs to be a little bit hungry. So if you eat it b'te'avan, like an ani eats b'te'avan, he eats with more of a desire because he's on the hungry side. So perhaps over here, it goes into the hitter mitzvah to make it into more of a lechem oni than it would be otherwise. It's a possibility. It's an interesting thought. There's another problem with Rashbam, that the Isra over here, the halacha is based on the hitter mitzvah of te'avon, that there's a whole sugya about this in Kuf Zayin, Amud Beis, Kuf Zayin Amud Aleph in the bottom, Kuf Zayin Amud Beis in the top, and there also it's discussing this halacha of not eating before Pesach, because of the Gemara there says that the problem is because of achila gasa, which the Rashbam over there learns. Achila gasa means you're so full that you're disgusted to eat anymore, and that's not considered an achila at all. The concern is you're going to get so full you're going to have an achila. It's not even an achila. That it's a pater on Yom Kippur, because it's considered, rather than achila, if you eat that kind of achila gasa on Yom Kippur, you're pater, because it's considered a ma'isa mazik, not a ma'isa achila when you're that full. So Tosfos over there disagrees with the Rashbam and learns that there's two different levels of achila gasa. There's achila gasa like the Rashbam's talking about. That we don't need to tell us a chiddush over there that it's usher to do. That's obvious that you can't do that. But there's a different level of achila gasa that you still have. You don't have any taiva anymore to eat. You just, if you would eat, then you would still have tam. It wouldn't be disgusting. You would have tam in it. It's just you have no desire to do so. And so according to Tosfos, it's more understood that we're concerned over here. And the Rashbam would fit a little bit more into that. But the Rashbam, the way he explains it over there, that the sugya is already explaining this Mishnah, saying that it's because of achila gasa and the real achila gasa. So then why would the Rashbam change that in the Mishnah over here and say it's because you should eat b'te'avon because of hitter mitzvah? It's much worse than hitter mitzvah. If you eat achila gasa, you're not yotzei at all. It's nothing. It's not even considered an achila. You're pater and Yom Kippur to eat like that. So how the Rashbam changed it over here in the Mishnah, I don't really have an answer for that. I'm just throwing out the question. You take a look at the Gemara in Kuf Zayin, the bottom of Kuf Zayin Amud Aleph and Kuf Zayin Amud Beis, according to the way the Rashbam learns over there. You'll see what I mean with this problem. Okay, going on. The Rashbam says, "If you ani should be Israel lo yochal," even an ani shouldn't eat until he is meisiv, until he leans over to use the kind of mitzvah of haseba. The Rashbam says, "Ba'arbi psachim on the night of Pesach, ad sheyesav kederech b'nei chorin b'mitzvah v'al shulchan zecher lecheres." To lean over like a wealthy person, like a free person. They used to sit on mitos, on certain types of beds. That would be something like a couch, or on the table. So lean on the table is zecher lecheres, because the haseba is reminder that we're b'nei chorin. So the question is, what's the chiddush of a filu ani? We don't find any chalukim in halacha between aniyim and ashirim. So over here, there's a halacha to do haseba. So why would I think that an ani is different? Why do we have to say a filu ani should Israel? The Mishnah has to tell us even an ani. I would think maybe for some reason an ani is not required to have a seba, and now it's telling us no, a filu ani, even though the ani still is required. How do we understand that? It's possible that the Rashbam is hinting to that by saying Allah shulchan v'alamita, that maybe he would not be yotzei. The Gemara says later on, you're not yotzei haseba if you're not leaning on something. You just to lean over to the side, there's nothing. You have to be leaning on something and be able to relax. The Gemara says b'di'evet, even if you lean on the Talmidim were in front of the Rebbe, there's a whole line of Talmidim that would lean. Each one leaned on the lap of the one next to him. So they had room to lean over. So perhaps I would think that an ani, maybe because he's just an ani by virtue of him being so poor that no matter what he does, it's not really derech eretz. So therefore, he's exempt from that. And comes to tell us, Kamash Malan, he does have to, or maybe because he needs to have a mita or something to lean on. And I might have thought that since an ani doesn't have that, maybe he's patur from a seva. Tosfos alludes to this pshat. Tosfos says, "Afilu ani should be Yisrael lo yochal ad sheyesav and salka daitach." Tosfos is addressing this question. What's the having in it to think not that way? Why do I have to say afilu? Says Tosfos, "Salka daitach da sebas ani lo chashiva seva." even if he does lean, maybe it's not considered leaning. He has nothing to lean on. So his leaning would not be considered derech eretz. He leans over on the floor or something like that. That's not derech eretz. You're not fulfilling anything by doing that. So there's another shot after that as well. But we see that the Rishonim are discussing this this nukuda, that why does the Mishnah say afilu? That they should not withhold from him from giving him 4 kosas of yain, even if he gets from the tamkli, he gets from the community chest, he gets from the food bank. The food bank, the people who give it out should make sure that they give every ani enough wine to drink arba kosas. So it's an interesting question. There's an interesting Misa that once a woman came to the Beis Levi and asked him if you could be Yosef arba kosas with milk. Is it considered Chemer Medina to be Yosef if she would drink milk? So the Beis Levi sent somebody to the back of the house and bring out enough money to buy her wine and meat for the 2 nights of the Seder. And she left very happy. And somebody asked him, Rebbe, like, why did you give her money for meat? What she was asking about 4 kosas. He said if she's drinking milk all through the Seder, that means that she doesn't have enough. Obviously, she's not eating meat. She can't afford meat. Otherwise, she wouldn't be drinking the last kosas with milk. So it must be that she doesn't have money for meat or for kosas or anything. So it's just a Misa Rav of how to look at the whole situation. But anyway, here it's saying that who are the yifchasu? Who are the ones that should not withhold from him? So the Rashbam says the yifchasulo means the gavai tzedakah. So the lo yifchasulo is going on the gavai tzedakah. That they can't withhold from him. They have to make sure that he gets daled kosas. Rashbam ends off. He brings the drasha. Where do we know daled kosas from? He says, "V'sidra mefurish lefanenu, v'sinim reishis Rabba, Rav Huna b'shem Rabbi Abba Omer, keneged arba lashonei gula, hamurim begolas Mitzrayim, v'tzeisi v'galti lakachti v'yitzalti, the parashas v'eira." So these 4 lashonei shagula are the makor 4 daled kosas. That's we see from this medrash. The question is, this was Shlomo Zalman. That's all was raised the question that what do you see from the psukim that dafka daled kosas? Why did Chazal pick daled kosas to be the way to maybe farsim these arba lashana shogula? Why not 4 kazesim of matzah? Say each, you start off you make kiddush because you make kiddush like you do on Yom Tov, and then you eat 4 kazesim of matzah. Each one connected a lashana gula. Why do we pick dafka yain? So Shlomo Zalman said a fascinating thing. He said that these 4 lashonos of gula, if you look at them, so they're not just 4 words saying the same thing. They're not just 4 similar synonyms that similarly express the same idea, the Klal Yisrael left Mitzrayim, but they go progressively deeper in what happened by Mitzrayim. The Rashbam here is a little bit out of order, but Votzeitzi means they just left. I took them out. So that's stage number 1. Ga'alti is that not only were they taken out, but they were considered Geulim, that they were redeemed. Like not only were they, we always say you can take so-and-so out of such a place, but you can't take the place out of the person. So the Klal Yisrael could remain like Avadim, even though they left. You could say maybe you could take a Jew out of Mitzrayim and kick the Mitzrayim out of the Jew. So Ga'alti tells you that the Mitzrayim went out of they were Geulim, Mitzrayim went out of them. And then Yitzalti is really the next one. Yitzalti is that I saved them, I rescued them, I continued to protect them, continued to have hashgacha over them, even as they went along. I didn't just take them out and let go of them. No, Yitzalti, I continued to redeem them as I went along. But Lakachti is the 4th level, that not only did I take care of them, but now I took them for me. They became part of me. They became connected to me. So that's the tachlis of the whole gula, is to go out and become an eved of Kadosh Baruch Hu, be connected to a Kadosh Baruch Hu, to Kabbalah Torah, and to continued mitzvahs that we do in the Torah. So since there are 4 deeper and more profound levels of gula over here being expressed, so Shlomo Zalman said that Chazal wanted to express them in a way which is deepening our awareness as we go along, and that's only possible through yayin. If you drink 4 cups of yayin, so it doesn't become, you don't just become more full, you become a little bit more intoxicated and a little more, your awareness, your consciousness gets expanded a little bit more as you go along with drinking wine. So therefore, it's dumya to, if you would just eat 4 kazayas of matzah, each kazayas just makes you more full. So as you go along, it's not getting better, it's getting too full. But with yayin, as you go along, it's getting better and better. It's expanding your consciousness to be able to understand more deeply what it is that we're doing. So that's why the Daled Kosas precisely were sukkah keneged these Daled Lashonos of Gula. So that's what Rosh Hashanah said. Okay, so just getting back to the lashon of our Arab Psachim, taking a look at Tosas. Tosas says, Arab Psachim, he says, Igrasin and Arve Nicha. It makes sense because the Tosas is asking an unasked obvious question, that is it Psachim plural or is it Arab singular? So we have a singular and a plural. So it says if you're Goris Arve Psachim like we are on top, so then it fits in properly. Arve Psachim makes sense. Igrasin and Arab. So what would it mean if it means Erev? Hakakamar. Erev sheshochnim bo psachim. The night that we shech the psachim, so the psachim is not going on the Yom Tov of psachim, it's going on the Korban Pesach. That's one possibility. Inami says there's another shot. Erev Pesach Rishon B'Sheni. It's referring to Erev Pesach. We have a Pesach Rishon, and at the time of the Beis Mikdash, when somebody couldn't make it there, it was an onus, then he would bring, or it was Tamei or whatever, then he would come bring Pesach Sheni, as the Torah says. So since there's Pesach Rishon and Sheni, so it's called Psachim plural to include those two. So that also Rosh Zalman had a problem with, because that would then imply, if we say Psachim is referring to Pesach Sheni as well, that would imply that the halachas we're saying over here, like such as not eating until it gets dark and is having Daled Kosos, would apply to Pesach Sheni as well. And there's no such halacha. There is a halacha to eat it al matzah, because the achilas Pesach has to al matzah s'mor yachlu. So that there is, because that's a din in the etzem achilas korban Pesach that you do by Pesach Sheni. But all the other dinim, there's no din of Haggadah, there's no din, not even having chametz in your possession, there's no din to drink Daled Kosos. So all these things do not apply. So what could Tosas possibly mean to say that Psachim would mean Pesach Sheni? Over here, Pesach Sheni doesn't have all these halachas the Mishnah is talking about. So that's a problem with Tosas. Don't have an answer for that, just pointing out the problem. Going on to the next Tosas. Tosas says, when it says Lo yochal Adam ad shetakshach, so Tosas says, first of all, we're not talking, the problem is not tefillah over here. You shouldn't miss tefillah. There's a tefillah yispalo. That we know there are halachas of not eating, like we're on Shabbos and have tests, you can't supposed to eat or do various things before tefillah that you shouldn't forget or miss the zman tefillah. So that's not the issue over here. We're saying there's an issue, even if you didn't, if you already did daven, still there's a problem issue in matzah. Can you remember Gemara? The below is followed tefillah mincha, tefillah b'shari was the also. We don't need to tell us a chiddush in Pesach if you didn't have mincha, because that applies the whole year. If it's on pure coming to Shabbos, like we said, in Tomar. Now Tosa says, ask the question, what is it telling us not to eat? What it says, lo yochal adam hashtakshach, a person should not eat. What is it that he shouldn't eat? Eat matzah. If we're talking about don't eat matzah, afila kodem and yasser. Can Amir Yerushalmi kol ochel matzah be'erev Pesach ilu bal arasasa beis kamid. The Yerushalmi makes a fascinating comparison that just like if a person would take his engaged wife, he already Makadosh her, already gave her a ring, he's Makadosh her in front of 2 Eidim, and now he didn't do the Nesuin yet, and tomorrow night is the wedding, and he's Baal a base Chamiv. So that's not the nicest thing. It's pretty bad. So similar to that is you have this man of the we'll speak more about this, but you have this man of achilas matzah coming up that night. So to eat matzah that morning, from the morning already, the Mishnah Berurah says applies from Alosa Shachar. From that morning, from Alosa Shachar of Erev Pesach, you already can't eat matzah because it's considered like Baal Arasasa Beis Chamev. Before the Nisuin, or before the Zman Achilas Matzah, you're already now being Baal as if you're being Baal by eating the matzah in the morning. So we can't be referring to matzah. So the Mishnah doesn't have to tell us not to eat matzah from the 9th hour, the beginning of the 10th hour of the day, because that's already also from the morning. So it can't be referring to matzah. Even minute targima, if we're referring to snacks, which we're going to say later on that's referring to eating fruits and vegetables, or even meat and eggs, as long as it's not mazonos. That's the Mishnah Paskins. So ha'amar b'Gemara, abu metabu b'minit targima. The Gemara says the opposite. In Kuf Zayin it says you're allowed to dip, meaning they used to eat everything by dipping. So you're allowed to eat those type of snacks on Erev Pesach. So in that you're allowed to eat the entire day, even up until the Seder if you're a little bit hungry. So what is it referring to that you can't eat? So Tosos Yeshlomer Da'iri b'matzah shira. We're talking about matzah shira, matzah that you baked with no water, but just with eggs or fruit juice, pure fruit juice. It's considered matzah shira. You can't be yotzei matzah with that. Since you can't be yotzei matzah with that, the lo asar b'Yerushalmi ela b'matzah haruya letzes ba chavasei vocal kodem is mana. The only time the Yerushalmi said it's asar, it's considered like your baal or sasa beis chamev. That's only a type of matzah that you could have been yotzei the mitzvah with, and instead you remarked him eating it shlo b'shas mitzvah. That's the isser for the morning. Of a matzah shira sharia, the matzah shira you can't be yotzei the mitzvah with that because it doesn't have tam matzah. It has a different. It's more like cake. It's considered al pi halacha. It's considered like tasav al-bakisset. It's considered cake. It's mazonos. So that would be mutter as far as the achilas matzah is concerned. Ben also would eat a matzah shira that day, but it's saying that you can't be kovea asuda a matzah shira. So what it needs to tell us that from the 9th hour and on, at the beginning of the 10th hour, that the Isra Achila is referring to something like matzah shira, which it's not Baal base all the rusasa base kamiv, but it's also not like eating fruits and vegetables because it's more filling because it's mazonos. And it's going to take away the te'avon, you'll be able to eat matzah that night. That's the Tosa says. Now the Maharsha raises a question. Maharsha asks that Tosus, besides just talking about matzah shira, Tosus could have said also, but seko shel nochrim. The Gemara says later on that. That's more earlier in Daf Mem. The Gemara says that the person can fill up with them as long as he eats a kazayas matzah at the end. As long as you're careful not to eat too much, and you eat a kazayas matzah at the end, so then you're okay. So, but that's perhaps only at the time of the Suda. But earlier in the day, you might fill yourself up with those things. So since it's baked by goyim, it's not lishma. It's just you know that it's not chametz, but it's also not lishma, not l'shem mitzvah. It's baked by goyim called b'tzekel shonachrim. So those b'tzekel shonachrim says the Maharsha who did the matzah the ukme b'tzekel shonach goyim. The same answer Tosus gave by matzah shira. Tosus could also have given by b'tzekel shel goyim. Te'enu yotze by yedechavasa. Tosus l'kaman. You're not yotze with them like Tosus says later. So why didn't Tosus give that answer? Yesh tachalek to matzah shira lav tam matzahs mitzvahi b'shari masha enken b'tzekel shel goyim tam matzahi. So the Maharsha wants to say a chiluk that perhaps Tosus did not mention that. He could have mentioned it, but perhaps he didn't, because maybe Tosus held that b'tzekel shel goyim, even though you can't be yotzei the mitzvah with it, maybe it still will take away from, it still will be considered like a baal or a sasa beis chamev. So he's not so sure, the Maharsha. He has a tzad like this, a tzad like that. Maybe because it has tam matzah, it is considered, or maybe not. So what does the suffix of this Maharsha depend upon? So I think that we have to clear a hakira. We have to go into the think a little more deeply into what is this issue? What did the Rabbanan say when in this Yerushalmi when they said it's like Baal Arasasa Beis Chamiv? What were they telling us, the Rabbanan? Were they saying that to just to take a woman who's a pnuya right now and she's there's no heter to be bald out, that's an isser right now. Right now, when you be bald out, you're being over an isser. So similarly, to take a chevet shel mitzvah, you have a chevet shel mitzvah, a matzah, that's set aside to be eaten at night as a matzah, as a mitzvah matzah, and instead you take it and you eat that during the day, the shem chol, for your own reasons, because you're hungry. So it's like you're being mezalzel b'chevet shel mitzvah. And that way, it's similar to Baal Sasa Beis Chamiv. You're taking her; she's supposed to be a mitzvah, and you're instead using her for your own, not for a mitzvah. So then that's considered you're pogea right in her by doing so. Or the other, that's one possibility. And it's actually mashma like that from the words of Tosfos, because Tosfos is saying that it's only the matzah ruya lotzis b'chavasa v'ochel kodem mana. You're taking a matzah that's roy to be ochel it, and you eat a kodem mana. Like you're taking a chevet shel mitzvah and you're being motzi oso l'chol. So you're right away you're zalzo in that matzah in that chevet shel mitzvah. The other way to look at it, possibly, is that if you eat matzah right now, there's nothing wrong with the chevet shel mitzvah. From that, we could have yesterday also. If I would eat a matzah the day before, matzah that's kosher for the seder, I wouldn't say I'm doing any isser the day before. It's only on that day. Why on that day? Because on that day, if I eat it, I take a chevet shel mitzvah and I eat it for my own needs. So then it's not going to be nicker that night when I eat it. A number of hours later, that night when I eat it, since I already ate the same thing in the morning for my own needs, it takes away the heker. It's no longer distinguishable that I'm eating it l'shem mitzvah later on. It's similar to what the Tur says. We came out of Sukkot, famous kasha of the Tur, of why do we sit in the sukkah on Sukkot? Why do we sit in the sukkah on Pesach? If it's Zechor Anani Kavod, the Anani Kavod began when Klal Yisrael left Mitzrayim, Pesach. So we should eat our matzah sitting in a sukkah on Pesach. That's the Tur's kasha. So the Tur answers famously, and we discussed this, other answers besides the Tur, but we'll just stick with the Tur now. The Tur answers that the Torah wanted to give us a mitzvah, Shiva Sukkah, at a time that it's distinguishable, that it's nicker, that we're sitting in at the same mitzvah. So we should go, and if we would sit in there in Pesach when it's spring, and he said all the people are going out of their homes and the air is good and they want to sit outside and it's nice. And people are sitting in all kinds of pergolas and things like that. So then it wouldn't be nicker that you're sitting in the same mitzvah. So the Torah put a dafka in after Sukkot, at Sukkot time, after it's already starting to get cold outside a little bit. The Torah didn't live in Dallas. We have to put air conditioners as well. But the Torah wanted to give it at a time that I guess most people in the world it's getting cold out there, and that's the time that people start going into their houses. And that way, when you go out and sit in the sukkah, the shem mitzvah, it's a nicker that it's the shem mitzvah. The Torah wants that the mitzvah we do is nicker, we're doing it in the shem mitzvah. That's what the Torah says. So you could say huadin as well here, but the Chazal asked a person to eat matzah that morning, because if you ate it the sarach chol, and when you eat it that night, the shem mitzvah, it's not nicker anymore that it's the shem mitzvah. That would be the shot. So for the words of Tosfos, it's more mashma the other way. It's mashma that it's because of the chayfet shel mitzvah. If it's because of chayfet shel mitzvah, so what's the nafkamina between these two studim? If it's chayfet shel mitzvah or the nicker, nafkamina l'chara should be b'tzeiko shel nakum, b'tzeiko shel akum. If you eat a matzah that is, on one hand, it looks like a matzah, it tastes like a matzah, but it's missing the shema, so it's not a matzah, but it looks and tastes like one. So if the problem is you're taking a chayfet shel mitzvah and you're using it l'shem chol, and that's the pigiyah and the chayfet shel mitzvah, so then it's not a chayfet shel mitzvah because you can't be yotzei with it. So b'tzeiko shel goyim is not a chayfet shel mitzvah. Then and Hanami, the Marsha would be right. Then Tosfos could have included that as well. It could have included not only matzah ashira that you could eat, and you need to say it's also not to get filled up on after the 9th hour. Tosfos could have also included b'tzeiko shel nachrim, the dough of the goyim, because it's also not a chayfetz shel mitzvah, so we really be included in that. So for the words of Tosfos, it would really be mashma that he would hold that way, because he didn't mention it because he didn't mention everything. But Tosfos' words is more mashma that it's depending on the chayfetz shel mitzvah. The words of the Rambam, however, other Rishonim, the Rambam among them, the Rambam says the following: Asru chachamim, it's a parak vav halach yud beis of chametz and matzah. Asru chachamim lechol matzah be'erev Pesach, kadesh yeh heker lachilasa be'erev. Rambam is clearly saying that the reason is not because you're pogea b'chefetz shel mitzvah, but you shouldn't eat matzah in the morning. There should be a heker lachilasa be'erev. That's what it's really about. Now the Rebbeinu Manoach as well in the Frekel Rambams, Rebbeinu Manoach says, Nira dafka b'yom arba asar huda asar mishum heker achilas matzah shel mitzvah shetzarach la'asos b'layla. However, shlosha asar mutar. It's only that day that it's asar because of the heker. You need a heker achilas matzah. Masha'en ken if you eat previous to that, let's say the night before or something like that. So then it's interesting that we don't find it in the Rishonim, we find it in the Magen Avram. And Magen Avram wants to say that it's usher from the Yerushalmi already from the night before, because the night before begins the Chiyuv B'dika, so you're already involved in Hilchos Pesach at that point, and so the Yerushalmi applies to that as well. Rebbeinu Manoach comes to say, not like the Magen Avram, it starts from that morning, because only from the morning, if you eat that very day and you eat something that's you're already in that day consuming matzah for your own needs, then that takes away the heker for that night. That's what the Rebbeinu Manoach says. So but there's a problem over here though, is that the Rebbeinu Manoach, if we're right, and it's totally in these two studies, this question of B'tzeiko Shel Goyim, the suffix of the Marsha depends on these two sides that we're saying. So then the Rebbeinu Manoach should hold that it's usher to have B'tzeiko Shel Goyim. Because B'tzeiko Shel Goyim, since it tastes like a matzah and it looks like a matzah, then it will take away the heker from it being a l'shem mitzvah at night, even though it's not a chayfetz shel mitzvah. That's what I would have thought. But the Rebbeinu Manoach goes on to say, he brings the Yerushalmi, and he says, Dafka matzah de mintera mishum chova huda aser, aber b'tzeiko shel goyim a matzah ashira mutra lechol. The Rebbeinu Manoach puts b'tzeiko shel goyim together, he packages it together with matzah ashira. Tosfos only mentioned matzah ashira. The Rebbeinu Manoach, like the Marshal suggested, does mention b'tzeiko shel goyim. So both of them are okay to eat as far as the Yerushalmi is concerned, and therefore both of them I would need the Mishnah to say not to eat them from the 10th hour. But that doesn't seem to fit the Rebbeinu Manoach shita though. Rebbeinu Manoach is the one that would, if he holds like the Rambam is, because of heker, I would think that b'tzeiko shel goyim, if it has a tam matzah like the Marshal says, then once it has a tam matzah, then that should be also because of the Yerushalmi. It should take away the heker. So, but I think that the Rebbeinu Manoach sort of answers the question himself, because he says dafka matzah de mintera mishum chova. The Rebbeinu Manoach is telling us a third possibility. He's saying that when is it considered like Baal or Sasso? It's matzah that's being guarded for the sake of the mitzvah. It's mintera. It's put aside for the sake of matzah's mitzvah. That if you take it and you use it for your own needs, then that takes away the heker. Only because it's mintera l'shem mitzvah. But so he has a little bit of a different understanding than Marshal. Marshal held that takes away the heker as you had tam matzah in the morning. Rebbeinu Manoach says no, it's not enough to have tam matzah. You need that it's guarded, it's put aside, it's set aside, it's miyuchad for the chilas mitzvah. So then, if you eat that, your own taiva or whatever in the morning because you're hungry in the morning, so then that would take away the heker, and therefore the b'tzeiko shel goyim that you're not putting it aside for that, it doesn't take away the heker. So he does hold this for a heker, but at the same time he also holds that the heker would not include b'tzeiko shel goyim. So therefore, according to Rebbeinu Manoach, we will, what the Marshal suggested, Rebbeinu Manoach will hold that takab shot in our Mishnah, that to answer Tosfos kasha, what do we need the Mishnah to tell us for? We already know it's usher in the morning. because it wouldn't include not matzah shira and not besekos shel goyim. Just another point. Tosfos and the following Tosfos asked, "Samach lemincha leyochal." Can you samach lemincha? In Tamar, Tosfos asked, "Va'amar v'chol shah." And Dafmem, here Tosfos brings down, but Sekel shal nachrim malo adam krisa mehem novavad shiyochal kazayas matzah b'achorna. V'cha asur lechol afilim bo yom. There it says you're allowed to eat from these Sekel shal goyim. You can eat them at the time of the seder. You can fill up with them as long as you eat a kazayas at the end. Now Rashi over there in Daf Mem learns, it says he's possibly to be learning this way, is that you made a motzi in the beginning of the seder, not on matzah like we do, but you made a motzi on these b'sekel shel goyim, and you're eating your whole suda that night with the four kosas and everything on b'sekel shel goyim until you get to the final kazayas, the dafikomen, and only that you're going to eat as matzah. But sof kosof, how can you eat that if you could eat that then? So why can't you eat it during the day? So this is an interesting answer. Yeshlamar de osa suda. Adam nizhar ve'ina ochel kol sobo, kadesh yochel masala te'avan. At the time of the meat, the very meal itself, you'll be more careful what you're doing, and you'll know how much you can eat, and not to fill yourself up too much. So you'll know where to stop in order to eat b'te'avan. Amin ba'od yom in adam nizhar ve'ochel kol sobo. The savar shara laila yisaber ba'arab yasaveh yoser ki yisbarach ha'meichel be'meyav. That says something that's. I would have. It's sort of counterintuitive. I would think that it's worse to eat these things, eat all this bread, goyisha matzah, right at the seder before you eat the final kazayis. And but earlier in the day, it's okay. I'll have plenty of time to get. I'll get hungry again. Just as the contrary, because it's during the day, you think you're going to get hungry again, but you'll eat so much you'll stay full, so you won't be so careful during the day. But at night, you have a matzah to come, you have the final kazayas to come, so you'll be more careful to make sure that you eat it properly. It's interesting that Tosfos is talking about this last kazayas, that the Rashbam, the sheet of Rashi and the Rashbam on Kufyat Tes on the Beis, is that the main mitzvah of matzah is actually not the first kazayas that we eat, it's the afikomen. The afikomen is not just a zecher. The Rosh is cholik on the Rosh holds is only a zecher, like the Lashon Gemara. But they say that the zecher is really the ikr. The zecher, the korban Pesach, that was eaten together with the matzah. That matzah was the ikr matzah and remains the ikr matzah until today. It's similar to the Tosfos and Edron and Kufay and Rishon and other places that compare this to Tkiyos to Yushav and Tkiyos to Me'umad. We make the bracha on the first Tkiyos when we're outside the Shemanes, right? Those called Tkiyos to Yushav. But then the ikr Tkiyos are really the Tkiyos to Me'umad. Just can't make a bracha later because you're already blowing before for the reasons that we do to mevabel us to Satan. But the main tkiyos are really the later tkiyos, and the Rashbam similarly holds over here that the main mitzvah matzah is the final kazayas. It's the afikomen. That's and the Rashi says it well in Kufyat Tes, and also in Rashi and Daf Mem Amud Aleph in the sugya by B'seiko Shel Goyim also is mashma that way. That's the Ikar mitzvah. So it's an interesting thing. We have two different cheshbonos going on over here in the sugya. A cheshbon of not eating in order to eat the first kazayas b'te'avon, or are we talking about the final kazayas b'te'avon? So Tosfos over here is saying an answer that the Gemara says in Daf Mem, you're allowed to be malach pisa mehem. You can eat those because it's the same suda. You'll be more careful. Mashen can during the day. That's what Tosfos says. Now the Bir Halacha in Hilchos Shabbos, and these halachas, and I believe it's in. Where it is. Bir Halacha is in Reish Mem Tes Sif Beis Divrei Maskel Mutter. Again, it's Reish Mem Tes Sif Beis Divrei Maskel Mutter. The Bir Halacha there is talking about the Isra Achila on Erev Shabbos, and he brings a exact opposite of this Tosfos from the Magen Avraham and the Or Zarua. Magen Avraham is based on Or Zarua, that exactly the contrary. What we would have thought intuitively, that it's more of a problem to eat these b'tzeiko shel nachrim at the time of the Suda. During the time of the same Suda, you have to be more careful. You can't, it's more easy to get filled up before you eat the Iker. Mashenkin during the day, you do have time to get hungry again. And so there in parentheses, the Mishnah Berurah, the Bir Halacha mentions this Tosas. It says exactly the opposite of the Magen Avraham, and it says, but most Achronim you see clearly not like this Tosas. So if not like this Tosas, so then all those Achronim that are not like this Tosas, then how do they answer the Kasher Tosas? Here we're saying you can't eat Samach L'Mincha, and we're talking about B'tzeiko Shel Goyim should certainly be Asar. If they're Asar earlier, they for sure should be Asar at the Suda. So I had certain terutzim, but I think I'm gonna have to put them on hold because I'm not so sure about what I wanted to say, if it's really going to work or not. So we'll leave with that kasha right now. Well, the kasha will be that according to the Achronim, and the Mishnah Berurah says that's the halacha, like the Magen Avraham, that it's more chamor to eat extra food at the same Suda than it is earlier. So then Hadra Kush Leduch, the Tosas kasha comes back. Then how did all those posts can answer the kasha Tosas that the Gemara says in Daf Mem that B'tzeiko Shel Nachrim Amal Adam Kresim Man. How is that okay if, especially if it's during that same Suda? How is that okay? Maybe the answer will be, at least according to Tosfos himself, maybe it's interesting that the Rashbam and Rashi's Shita, that the main Kazayas, his last Kazayas, is not even mentioned in Halacha. In Halacha, the Shulchan Aruch, the Tur of the Shulchan Aruch go with the Rush, that the main Kazayas is the first Kazayas. And what we eat at the end is only a zecher. So perhaps since it's only a zecher, and that's not the main mitzvah, then we're not so concerned that zecher should also be b'tei avan. You should do it in a mehudadik way. You should do it, yes, but that has to be done in a mehudadik way to refrain from eating before in order to eat that b'tei avan. So maybe lav dafka, maybe they hold that it's not so difficult that is not eaten as a so much b'tei avan. Okay, so I think we'll hold it with that. I just wanted to say that we're starting a beautiful winter's month. We have a 6 month month, it gives us an extra month to learn. And the concept of, I sent it out, I don't know how many you've heard it, but the concept of winter is choshech, as opposed to or. The summer is the or. The or is mizgaber al choshech in the summer. That's why all the Yom Tovim and the Torah are in the summer. Pesach ushers in the summer, and Sukkot ends the summer, and then after Sukkot we tell each other a good winter. That's when winter begins. That's the Minhag Yisrael. So in the winter we have no Yom Tovim Deraisa at all because it's Man Choshech. Every Yom Tov is a Gilui of Kodesh Baruch Hu. That's a Gilui Ha'or. But Choshech, when the Choshech is Miskaber on the Or, there is no Izgalas Or. All we have is Yom Tovim D'Rabbanan. We have a Purim, which is Esther min Tarminayan, Gemara says in Chulin, Shenemar Ha'inochi, Hinei Anochi, Haster Aster Panam Yom Yamahu. Esther is B'toch Hester Panim, and Hanukkah is Choshech Al Panei Tahoim. Ze Yovan Shichchichu and Name Shel Sarasayim. So the whole Purim and Hanukkah are all about Choshech, but the tafkid of the chiluk between those Yom Tovim and the Yom Tovim D'Oraisa, Yom Tovim D'Oraisa are for us to tap in to Or that's already there. The Or is shining already; it's shining brightly. Just we have to tap into it. And the Yom Tovim D'Rabbanan, what's there is Choshech. We have to struggle to find the Or mitoch Choshech to bring out that Or from the Choshech. That's the tachlis of the Yom Tovim D'Rabbanan. And that's what Charif is about. Winter is all about. Winter is the time that we plant the seeds and they germinate and they take roots and then finally, and that's when all the growth happens. We try to bring out from the ground, we bring out the koach achiyus from there. So also mitzad Talmud Torah, we're trying to bring out the Or from the choshech. It's a zman choshech, bovel, in the Torah Sheba'al Peh, Talmud Bavli, is in a place of Choshech. We just learned about Big Bavel, and that was mamish the spitz, that the epitome of Choshech is Bavel, and the Talmud Bavli, they succeeded in bringing out the Or Torah Choshech. This is a big subject, just touching on it now. That so our tafkid in Zman Choref, the time of Choshech, is to put all our meilus and Yigiyah B'Torah to be able to bring out the incredible Or that there is. So Choshech, if you just learn it on the surface, makes no sense. Doesn't make sense. The kashas, the steeras. But when you go into it more and more and more, then we can see the Gavaliga Or, the amazing Or that's there within it. As long as we apply ourselves and we work hard and we schwitz and we orv, we work really, really hard to bring out what there is, then we'll be able to zocha to see the beautiful Or that there is that's just hiding behind this Choshech and acquire it as ours, as our kinyan and our chelik in Torah. Tzachar Rabba, and until next time.